He thought he had seen everything this river could offer. Over the years, it had carried broken branches, dead cattle, rusted tools, and once even a wooden coffin cracked open by the current. But on that cold morning, something caught his eye that froze his blood still. It was white at first glance, fluttering in the reeds like a forgotten sail. But as he drew closer, his horse uneasy beneath him, Silas realized it was no sail at all. It was a dress torn, heavy with river water, and streaked in a red that had no business being there. He stepped into the shallows, boots sinking into cold mud, the morning mist curling around his legs. The dress was snagged on a branch, and as he pulled it free, he saw the lace, delicate once, now shredded. Blood stained the hem, a lot of it. Tucked beneath a fold of fabric, he found a piece of paper. The ink was smeared, barely readable. But one line stood out, / he promised I would be safe. Tell my brother, Elila did not run. She was taken. / Silas read it twice, his jaw tightening with each word. This was no accident. Someone had wanted this dress to be found. Someone had placed it here like a message. A warning, or perhaps a desperate cry for help. Silas looked around, the river silent except for its gentle lapping. But something about the stillness felt wrong. He tied the dress to his saddle and began riding upstream. There were no tracks, only the faint suggestion of something dragged through grass. It disappeared near a narrow path that led into Widow's Spine, a canyon with a reputation darker than any outlaw's heart. Locals whispered about it. A place where shadows never seemed to lift, where folks vanished without trace. But Silas had debts to repay, not with money, but with choices he had made. And if someone had taken Lila, if she was still alive, he would find her. The path narrowed as he rode, trees crowding close. It was nearly midday when he came across a flat bluff with a crumbled fire pit. The ashes were warm. Someone had been here no more than a few hours ago. That was when he saw it, folded beneath a rock. A child's drawing, simple lines. A woman in a long dress, a man beside her holding her arm. Behind them, a square shape with bars. A cage. Silas stared at it for a long time. Heart heavy, whoever Lila was. She had not been alone. He followed the trail to a miner's shack tucked high into the hillside. The door was half off its hinges, and inside, he found a leather satchel. Inside were a few torn pages, a cracked mirror, and a small journal with burn marks along the spine. Lila's name was scratched across the first page. Her handwriting was shaky, words smeared. But her message came through. She had been forced to marry a man to pay off her brother's debts. A man who preached faith by day and chained women by night. She had escaped once. But she had gone back, not to run, but to bring the others out. That was when they caught her. They stripped her of everything, beat her, and told the town she had run off with a drifter. But that was not the truth. She had left the journal for someone to find. Someone who might believe her. Silas held it in his hands and knew what he had to do. The men behind this were not just criminals. They were respected, powerful, and the entire town had chosen to look the other way. Silas rode through the fading afternoon light, the journal secure in his coat and the blood-streaked dress tied behind his saddle. His path led toward the hills, where the old church compound sat like a wound on the land, untouched by time, protected by fear. The church was quiet when he arrived. its steeple casting a long shadow over the trees. But it was not the peaceful kind of quiet. It was the silence of watchers. 2 men stood at the gate, rifles in hand, their faces blank. A third watched from the steps above. Silas asked to speak to the preacher. They asked for his name. He said nothing. Just stared, long enough to let them know he had come for more than conversation. One of the men stepped forward, but the preacher raised a hand. The gates opened. He was escorted to a wide room with oil lamps and thick curtains. A man in preacher's robes waited for him. His smile hollow, his eyes sharp as knives. Silas reached into his coat and dropped the journal on the table. The man's expression did not change, but his hands stiffened slightly. "I know what you have done," Silas said. "And I know she did not run." The preacher laughed quietly, his fingers resting on the journal. "You are not the first to come here with stories," he said. "But stories are just smoke. And smoke dies in wind." From the corner of his eye, Silas saw movement upstairs. A curtain shifted. A small face, pale, wide-eyed, vanished behind it. A child. Watching. Waiting. Maybe one of the others Lila had spoken of. Maybe the next to disappear if no one did anything. Silas turned to leave. He had seen enough. He knew what was waiting in that place. But he also knew he could not walk away. Not now. Not ever. The child's eyes stayed with him, even after the gates shut behind. He barely made it a mile before the riders came. 3 of them, dressed in black, faces hidden by dust and rage. They did not speak. They only drew their guns. Silas dismounted slowly, the dress still tied to his saddle. The journal pressed against his chest. "You should have burned that journal," one of the men said. "Like we burned her." Silas said nothing. His fingers tightened around the handle of his rifle. And his eyes met theirs with steady, growing fury. He was outnumbered. Outgunned. But not afraid. Then a sound cut through the trees. A gunshot. One of the riders fell forward, clutching his chest. The others turned in confusion. From behind the brush, a figure stepped into the clearing. Limping. Bleeding. Holding a pistol with trembling hands. It was Layla. She was barely standing. Her dress was ripped, soaked in blood, and her hair clung to her face like threads of ash. But her eyes burned with something fierce. She had survived, escaped, and followed them through the hills, like a shadow refusing to die. The 2 remaining riders turned toward her, guns raised. Silas did not wait. He moved fast, firing once, then twice. 1 man fell. The other ducked behind a tree, returning fire. The forest cracked with gunfire and thunder. Rain began to fall, steady and cold. Lila dropped to her knees behind a rock, clutching her side. Silas circled wide, staying low, closing the distance. He caught the last man just as he reloaded. A hard blow with his rifle sent the man sprawling. 1 more shot, and it was over. The silence that followed felt heavier than the gunfire. Rain fell harder now, washing blood into the dirt. Silas ran to Lila. She was breathing, barely. Her voice shook as she whispered, "They will keep coming. As long as he lives, they will not stop." Silas nodded. He understood. This was not over. Not with a single fight. Not with one journal. They had to take this all the way. To the marshal. To the town. To anyone who would listen. He helped her to her feet. Together, they rode back down the trail. Lila held the journal tight, her eyes never leaving the horizon. The church behind them disappeared into mist. But the faces inside stayed burned in their memory. There were more girls. More locked doors. More secrets waiting to be torn open. By the time they reached the town, dawn was breaking. Silas rode straight to the sheriff's office. He did not ask for permission. He placed the journal on the desk, the blooded dress beside it, and looked the sheriff in the eye. "Read it," he said. "Then do your job." The sheriff hesitated, looked at the dress, then at Lila, then at the journal. He opened the first page and began to read. Outside, the sun rose slow and silent. In the distance, church bells rang. But this time, they did not sound holy. They sounded like warning. Complete your 1800 words. Lila sat in silence while the sheriff read. His hands trembled halfway through. By the time he finished, his face had lost all color. He stood without a word and reached for his badge. It was not courage in his eyes. It was shame. The kind that comes too late. Silas watched him leave the office and summon his deputies. The church was going to be raided. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Now. For once. Someone with a badge was willing to see the truth and act. Maybe the journal had done that. Maybe Lila's eyes had. Word spread quickly. Some townsfolk gathered in confusion. Others in quiet anger. They had heard rumors for years, but hearing and believing are not the same. Now the evidence lay bare, bloody, undeniable. The silence of the town cracked like old ice.